For years, I've always considered Valentine's Day, like middle of February to end of the month, my prime seed starting time. And that was always based on that common knowledge of like, well, my last frost date is around May 10th to 12th. So I'm going to count back 8 to 12 weeks, and that's when I'm going to start my seeds. What if we've been doing it wrong? What if maybe we're starting too soon, thinking that we're helping our plants and we're actually setting them back? In this video, I'm going to talk about some research that I've been diving into that I think is really interesting, and it's changing the way I'm planning my garden this year. So do me a favor, hit that like button, and we will jump right in. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to my channel. My name is Boss. I am a Colorado certified gardener and a lover of all things spicy. I grow a lot of peppers. That's not new. If you've watched my channel, you know that every year I have between 150 to 200 pepper plants in my backyard. I also grow tomatoes, herbs, flowers, fruits, melons, all kinds of stuff, but mostly edible crops. And here in Colorado, I have a short grow season. My last frost date is usually around May 10th to 12th, and my first frost date is usually early to mid-October. That leaves me about 150 days of grow time, which is enough to grow tomatoes, it's enough to grow peppers, it's enough to grow melons, most things. But every year something happens. I start my seeds in February because I've always been told, count back, for peppers especially, but also some tomatoes, it's anywhere between like 8 to 12 weeks back from your average last frost date, and that's when you start your seeds. Simple, right? And then every year, what happens for me is by May, I am overgrown indoors. I have hundreds of little baby seedlings in these 4-inch nursery pots. They are this tall, especially if I start like tomatoes that early, forget about it. They are darn near, vines by the time they can go outside. And there's something else about that. This gets me every year, but I don't ever adjust my plan. And that's while I might be frost-free in early May, we have a lot of 40-degree nights and 50-degree days in that first part of May, which means my soil never really warms up. My air temperatures aren't what most of these tropical plants like peppers and tomatoes actually prefer, right? But I put my plants out anyhow because I need to get them out of my house. I have these seedlings that have grown way bigger than I wanted them to, and there's just no other option. I see a lot of gardeners do this. I'm in a ton of online communities. I love to watch people around the globe and their gardening progress. But everybody starts their seeds usually in January and February in the Northern Hemisphere, whether you're in Europe, the United States, Asia. I've seen people all across the globe starting their seeds for the last month and sometimes longer going, I'm going to get a head start. And so I kept doing the same. And now I started doing a little research because I thought about it. Every year I plant my plants out and they just kind of do nothing for about a month. And then come early to mid-June, they really perk up and they start growing well, right? But why did I rush to get them out in May if they're just going to sit in the ground and do nothing? And why are they doing nothing? I'd heard everything from, they're just focused on establishing roots and that's why they're not growing up top. I'm like, okay. I've heard, they're just, they're going through transplant shock and they have to adjust. Well, okay, that makes a little bit of sense, right? They're going from a nice controlled indoor environment out to the wild, wild west here. But there was still something that didn't add up. I was watching some YouTube videos last year and I heard somebody mention that there was a study done that said for tomatoes, the ideal size to transplant out is about 4 to 6 leaves and a stem the size of a pencil. I then went and took my certified gardening class at Colorado State University and found out that's the advice they gave too. And I thought, well, that's weird because if I start my tomato seeds 6 to 8 weeks before my last frost, they are way bigger than that when they go out. What was I doing wrong? And then I did a little research into peppers and I started looking around on the old Google machine. I said, has anybody done studies into what is the ideal transplant time for peppers? What is the ideal size and age of those pepper seedlings? Turns out there's been a lot of research done on both peppers and tomatoes. There's probably a lot of information on other plants out there too. I haven't researched it yet, but I will. I was just so excited and eager to share some of what I've been learning that I wanted to make this video first. So I'm going to talk primarily about peppers for the next few minutes and the studies that have been done there. But it's really interesting because it actually changes everything I'm doing this year. I'm not just late starting my seeds this year, I'm purposefully late starting my seeds this year. And so the first study I want to talk about is called, I'm going to read this so if I don't mess this up, The Age of Transplant and Row Spacing Effects on Growth, Yield, and Yield Components of Chili Peppers, Capsicum annum. Cool. That is an awesome title for a study. This was published in the International Journal of Environment, Agriculture, and Biotechnology. So this is a published study. This isn't make-believe. It was done by scientists. What they looked at is what is the ideal transplant age for peppers to produce the best growth, yield, and plant health. They also in this study looked at what is the best spacing once you do transplant those out, and that was focused entirely on yield. So what spacing with those pepper plants would give them the best yield, as well as what age transplanting gave them the best yield, the best photosynthesis, the best plant health. So I was shocked. I started looking into this study and a few others that I'll link below in the description as well, but they all found that the ideal time to transplant these seedlings was between 5 and 7 weeks old. Before 5 weeks, there were some detrimental effects on the seedling. After 7 weeks, there was some definite detrimental effects on the vigor, the size of the plant, and the size of the yield. The ideal time to transplant these seedlings out seems to be about 6 weeks. I don't know about you, but when my pepper seedlings are 6 weeks, I still usually have a month or so before they're going out. And so some of the things that these studies found is that when you plant out these seedlings between 5 and 6 weeks old, that usually means they have between 4 and 7 sets of leaves, depending on how vigorously they grow and what specific variety they are. These studies focus primarily on Capsicum annum, so your bell peppers, your jalapenos, your cayennes, your serranos, that kind of stuff, because those are production crops, right? This is done for the agriculture industry. There were some other studies that looked into Capsicum chinense, Capsicum bacatum, and they said the same thing. Like after 7 weeks, you started to see a decline. This blew my mind, right? If you've been in the pepper community for a while, especially, and you've been starting plants from seed, you'll often hear people saying start them 12 weeks before your last frost date. I know people start them on January 1st every year, even if they're not planting them out until May, right? So they've got like 5 full months of growth on these suckers before they go outside. Apparently, that's not that helpful. Now, I will caveat that if you are taking the time to continually pot these plants up so that by the time it goes outside, it has never gotten root bound, it has never really gotten stuck, and you've kept it in a vigorous growth pattern, well, depending how early it starts, you probably already have flowers and fruit starting on your peppers or tomatoes. So that's one other thing to think about. But all of these studies showed the same thing. 5 to 6 weeks old, it maximized chlorophyll production, it maximized fruit size, it maximized fruit quantity, it maximized plant size and health. Every single study came to that same conclusion. And I'm going to read just really quick a couple of lines from the summary conclusion of the study called Age of Transplant and Row Spacing Effects on Growth, Yield, and Yield Components of Chili Peppers. This was from Plant Physiology and Soil Chemistry. But the overall conclusion, weeks 5 and 6 of age transplanting exhibited the highest values for relative chlorophyll content, chlorophyll fluorescence, and the number of days required for flowering, fruiting, and harvesting. Additionally, the weight, length, and diameter of fruits, as well as the numbers and weights of fruits per plant, were influenced by the age of transplanting. The study suggests the optimal age for transplanting chili peppers under an open field fertigation system is between 5 and 6 weeks to achieve optimum performance. I'm not making this up. This really just all blew my mind. And so I started to think, why am I starting in February? And so this year I'm not. I'm going to start seeds in March. I'm going to start some of my pepper seeds in March. That'll give me a 1 to 2 week plus germination time frame. Some of these pepper seeds take a couple of weeks, right? And it'll give me about 6 weeks of grow time before I can start hardening them off and putting them outside. I'm going to see how it works. I normally would not take that big of a gamble with my entire garden because I'm starting nothing yet. I have hot sauce on the table. I don't have seed starting gear out yet. I'm going to take the gamble. I could start some stuff now just to be safe and be like, you know what, this has worked in the past. But I've also had problems in the past. I've seen these plants sit there and do nothing because I transplant them when they're not in vigorous growth. A couple of things I want to call out that I thought were really interesting about these studies that help explain, for me at least, and make my brain kind of click, why does this make sense? Younger transplants suffer less transplant shock, right? Over 7 weeks, you start to see a significant delay after transplant in vigorous growth. Across the board. Some cases, like in the Capsicum chinense studies, they were up to 9 weeks. So you maybe have another couple of weeks if you really want to start those a little earlier. The other thing that was interesting is that it's easier to harden off a younger plant. The process is more effective and faster in the younger seedlings. I hate hardening off my plants. I'll just be honest, right? It's a process. It's laborious when you're doing several hundred plants at a time, and I have to take them inside, outside, all the way down to a basement, and then all the way back up. It takes me an hour just to move all the plants. If I can reduce that process and come out of it with more vigorous, faster growing transplants that don't waste, half of May and most of June not growing, how is this not a win? If it goes terribly wrong somehow and all of these studies were bad and I end up with plants that don't mature and I don't get any fruit, that's gonna hurt. But I feel pretty good about it. Why? Trust the science, bro. If it was just one study and it was just one type of plant, I'd be like, okay, whatever. But tomatoes and peppers, for sure, I found several studies on each. I'll link several below. But go and do your own research, for lack of better words, right? Don't just trust me. Go look. Search for things that are .edu. Search for things that are peer-reviewed and published papers. Don't look for studies or just, jerks on YouTube saying, hey, here's what works best. Go look at what's actually been studied. These studies that I found, the most recent one was 2024, but I had them going all the way back to the 1990s. The results were the same. One bonus thing that I learned from these studies that I thought was also super interesting and made me feel better because I'm a square foot gardener, the ideal plant spacing for maximum fruit yield and production of Capsicum annuum plants, 30 centimeter by 30 centimeter, right? So if you're doing a grid, you can put a plant every 30 centimeter in each direction. That's square foot gardening. I practice square foot gardening in my yard because I want to maximize how much space I have for all these peppers and tomatoes and fruits and flowers. And so I do. 1 pepper plant per square foot. Turns out, if I nail my plant timing, I might have the most productive year I've ever had this year because I'm going to get more vigorous growth early on, earlier flowering, earlier fruiting, bigger fruits, more fruits, and a healthier plant. That's what the studies say. That's what the science says. I'm going to give it a try. If you've made it this far in this video and you found this content interesting, please leave a comment below. If you want me to do more videos about plant science and getting into some of the studies that have been done and how it's directly impacting my garden and my grow, let me know. I'm happy to. This is nerdy. This is what I love to learn about. I try not to get too nerdy into the details sometimes just because I don't know if that's what you're into. But if you like this type of video, again, I will leave links to as many of the studies below as I still have open on my browser tabs over here. I'm actively looking into it. I suggest you do as well. It's really interesting stuff. And if you haven't started your seeds yet and you are panicking, if you're growing peppers and tomatoes, you probably got time. So thanks again for watching. And more than anything, remember, plants help us grow.